A single mother was asleep, standing up. Her hard hat was still on. Her scanner was still in her hand. Her spine was braced against a steel shipping container, and her knees were locked, and her body had learned how to shut down without ever lying down. Deacon Holloway stood 3 feet away and stared. He owned this terminal. He owned 13 others just like it, spread from Long Beach to Savannah to Newark. His company moved $11 billion of cargo a year, and 4,100 people worked his docks, and every rule that governed their shifts had crossed his desk. He could have fixed almost anything on this pier with one phone call. He did not make the call because he did not yet understand what he was looking at. The woman's eyes opened. She did not gasp. She did not stumble. Her hand tightened on the scanner and her voice came out flat and fast, the voice of pure instinct. She said, "Don't write down my name, write down the hour." Then he saw the badge reader clipped to her chest. The small screen glowed green in the dark. It said she had clocked out 23 minutes ago. She was standing on his dock at 3 in the morning, scanning his containers, doing his work, and the system said she had already gone home. Those 23 minutes had disappeared from the record he could see, while she kept working as if nothing had changed. That was the part that froze him, not the sleeping. Workers got tired. He knew that the way a man knows a fact from a report. What froze him was the machine. The payroll system swore this woman was gone, resting, off the clock, and the woman herself was standing in front of him with a scanner in her hand. The paper said one thing, the person said another, and the paper was his. He looked at her badge again before she walked back toward the cranes. There was an employer code printed under her photo. 4 letters, HRLN. He ran 14 terminals. He signed the policies. He approved the budgets. And he did not recognize a company code stamped on a badge inside his own operation. That bothered him more than he wanted to admit. His car was idling outside the gate. A driver, a warm seat, a thermos of coffee nobody had asked for. Across the harbor, on the top floor of a glass tower in downtown Long Beach, his penthouse sat dark and quiet and waiting. He could go home whenever he wanted. That was the whole difference between his life and hers, and he knew it. Home, for him, was a choice. For the people on this dock, it was a math problem. He did not get in the car. He took out his phone and typed her badge number from memory, the way he memorized cargo manifests, fast and exact. Then he sat in the back seat with the door open and pulled her file through the executive portal. The screen loaded, then it loaded again. 2 records came up for the same woman. Her name was Savannah Huerta. The first record ran through Holloway Terminal Group, his company, his logo, his letterhead. It showed her hours for the week, and it stopped at exactly 39 and a half. Not 40, never 40. The second record ran through a company called Harborline Staffing Solutions, an affiliate he half remembered from an acquisitions memo years ago. That record began at the exact minute the first one ended. Same woman, same dock, same supervisors, same job, 2 payrolls. He scrolled between them for a long time, and the shape of it slowly came clear. On paper, Savannah Huerta was 2 different workers. Neither one ever crossed 40 hours. Neither one ever earned overtime. Neither one qualified for full benefits. The hours that should have cost his company extra belonged on paper to nobody at all. He told the driver to go home without him. A minute later, he changed his mind and climbed into the back seat. They rode back across the harbor in silence, watching the port lights shrink behind them. He did not sleep that night. He was 52 and had built his career on knowing every number in his business, yet one had been hiding inside his own house. The next night, he came back. No car, no driver, no suit. He wore a canvas jacket, a plain hard hat, and a temporary badge that said Compliance Audit. Technically true because he had opened one under an untraceable name. He walked the dock at Pier F and asked quiet questions and wrote things on a clipboard, and nobody looked at him twice. Men with clipboards were furniture at a port. A shift supervisor named Jim Hull explained the whole thing without being pushed, because Jim Hull thought he was talking to a friendly auditor from corporate. Jim called it the split badge model. He said it the way a man describes the weather. When a worker got close to overtime, the system moved them on paper to harbor line. Same crane, same containers, same boss, new badge. The hours reset to 0. Deacon asked what happened if a worker refused the extra harbor line shifts. Jim shrugged and said nobody got fired for refusing. Firing left a record. Refusing just meant your Holloway hours stayed capped at 39 and a half at a wage nobody in Southern California could live on alone. You were free to say no. You were free to drown. Jim said most people took the shifts. He said it like it was a compliment to them. Deacon wrote it all down in small, neat letters. His hand was steady. His stomach was not. Somewhere under the noise of the cranes, a sentence from his childhood surfaced, printed in his memory in his father's voice. Labor is a line item. His father had run trucking depots in Houston, and he had said it at the dinner table like a prayer. You can feel things on your own time, son, not on the company's. Deacon had built his whole life on that sentence. He had turned 3 Houston depots into a coastal empire, collecting cleaner margins and awards without ever seeing what those margins looked like from underneath. Now he had. The margin looked like a woman asleep on her feet, holding a scanner, guarding her own name. He found her again near the end of the shift at the fence line by Pier F, and he did not speak to her. He just watched her work for 4 minutes. She moved fast and clean. She logged container numbers other checkers missed. She flagged a bad twist lock on a chassis before the driver pulled out and probably saved someone from potential injury. She was good at this. She was better than good, and the system that employed her had split her in half so it would never have to say so out loud. He walked back to the gate with his clipboard full and his chest tight. One question kept circling. Who had approved this? Somewhere there was a policy, and somewhere on that policy there was a name. He told himself he was hunting for it. He did not yet know he was hunting for himself. Savannah's badge revealed 2 workers on paper. Now Deacon was closing in on the signature that made her disappear. Savannah Huerta got 12 minutes for a break, not 15, 12. The schedule said 15, but the walk from the crane line to the brake trailer ate 3 of them, and nobody counted the walk. She sat on an overturned crate outside the full trailer, ate vending machine crackers, and opened a battered spiral notebook on her knee. The notebook was almost full. She wrote in it every night, fast, in a shorthand she had invented herself. Dates, real hours worked, shifts that vanished from the schedule after they were worked. Equipment numbers next to the word failed, underlined twice. She had been keeping it for 11 months, and she kept it in a plastic freezer bag inside her jacket because paper on a dock got wet, and this paper mattered. Deacon sat down on the crate across from her with 2 coffees from the machine. He said he was sorry about what he had seen the night before. He said no one should have to sleep standing up. He meant it, and it came out soft, and she looked at him the way you look at a wet floor sign after you have already fallen. She said, I don't need an auditor who feels bad. I need the hours I actually work to still exist after payroll closes. Then she went back to her notebook, and he drank his coffee and shut up, and after a while she talked anyway. Not because she trusted him, because it was 3 in the morning and the words had been stacking up for 11 months, and he was the first person with a clipboard who had ever sat down on a crate. Her story came out in pieces, the way tired people tell things. No order, just wait. She had a daughter, 6 years old, named Lucy. A neighbor named Marie English watched Lucy overnight for whatever Savannah could pay, which some weeks was $40, and some weeks was a bag of groceries and an apology. Savannah worked the night side because night differential was 90 cents more an hour and 90 cents mattered. She was rarely home while her daughter was awake. She saw Lucy asleep at 4 in the morning and asleep at 2 in the afternoon, and she had learned to read her daughter's whole day from the position of one small arm on a pillow. Then she said the thing that would sit in Deacon Holloway's chest for the rest of this story, though neither of them knew it yet. She said Lucy had asked her a question last month. Her daughter wanted to know if mom sleeps standing up so she can catch the table before it gets lonely. Savannah said she still had no idea what the kid meant. 6-year-olds talked in riddles. She laughed one short laugh with no air in it, closed the notebook, and went back to work with 4 minutes still owed to her. Deacon stood by the brake trailer for a long time after she left. He did not understand the line about the table either, but he understood the vending machine. He walked over to it. Half the rows were empty. One row was jammed. The coffee machine beside it carried an old, yellow-taped, out-of-order sign, proof that it had been broken for months, and nobody with authority had stood there hungry. He could not fix the payroll that night. The payroll was a mountain, and he had not even found its base yet, but he could fix a vending machine. So he did something small and quiet instead. From his phone, through a facilities account 3 levels down from his name, he authorized a replacement, not another vending machine. A staffed hot meal station for the night crew, soup and rice and coffee, free, billed to a terminal maintenance line so ordinary that legal would never blink at it. It appeared 4 nights later like a mistake. A folding table, 2 warmers, an urn of real coffee, a laminated sign that said, "Night crew only, no charge." The longshoreman circled it like it might be a trap. Rudy Norris asked the gate guard who ordered it, and the guard shrugged. By week's end, the doc assumed someone upstairs had made a mistake best left unreported. It changed nothing. Deacon knew that. It was soup. It was not overtime. It was not benefits. It was not one single hour returned to one single worker. But it was the first thing in years that this terminal had given instead of taken. And the men and women who lined up for it stood a little differently while they ate. He watched from the fence line one night and felt something he had no name for. He was capable of building things for these people. He had just never once tried. Savannah noticed the meal station the first night it appeared. She took 1 cup of soup, drank it standing, and said nothing to anyone. Then she opened her notebook and wrote the date and 3 words: hot food, unexplained. She recorded gifts the same way she recorded thefts, because on this dock, anything unexplained eventually got explained, and the explanation was never free. 2 nights later, she decided to test the auditor. She found Deacon by the gatehouse and told him to walk with her, and she talked while she checked containers because her hands never stopped working while her mouth was busy. She said she had been gathering evidence for almost a year. She flipped the notebook open against a container wall so he could see it in the work lights. Unpaid hours, page after page. Workers carried under 2 badge identities, listed by name. Rudy Norris, split. Tia Long, split. Jermaine Stone, split. Fatigue incidents, dated. A man who fell asleep at the wheel of a yard truck in March. A checker who walked into a moving chassis in June because she had been awake 31 hours across her 2 paper selves. Safety reports filed and then gone, like the paper had never existed, like the file drawer ate them. He asked what happened to the last person who complained out loud. She told him about Jermaine Stone. Jermaine had gone to the terminal office with 3 pay stubs and a printed hours log. Polite, careful, everything in writing. Nobody fired him. His official job stayed right there on the books. His shifts just got thinner, week after week, until the money could not cover his rent, and he moved back to his mother's place in Bakersfield. She said, "They don't fire people here. They make staying impossible." Then she told him the other thing. The reason her voice was faster tonight. The Coral Meridian was arriving before dawn Friday, and management had promised an unload time far faster than the safety schedule allowed. The promise had gone out to investors in a press note. Most of the assigned crew had already worked beyond 50 real hours that week, recorded only in her notebook. Deacon went back to his tower and started digging from the top. He had the highest credentials in the company, and for 2 days he used them like a crowbar. He pulled every safety complaint filed at his 4 California terminals over 3 years. What he found was not missing paperwork. It was worse. The paperwork was all there. It had just been renamed until it could not hurt anyone. A crane operator had reported falling asleep at the controls. The file called it an employee attentiveness matter and closed it with a coaching note. 3 workers had raised overtime concerns in writing. The files logged them as voluntary availability discussions. A container had slipped its spreader in February and dropped 4 feet onto a chassis. The report called it a procedural deviation, not a failure, not a near miss, a deviation, like the crane had taken a scenic route. Every rename had an approval chain, and he climbed the chains one by one. Terminal manager, regional director, operations vice president. The chains all bent the same direction, upward and inward, toward a single foundational document in the corporate archive. It was titled Workforce Flexibility Framework, and it was sealed behind executive authentication, and it was the legal root of the whole split badge machine. Everything Jim Hull had shrugged about on the dock grew out of this one file, like branches out of a trunk. He authenticated. The document opened. He was expecting an old executive's name at the bottom. Somebody retired, somebody dead, somebody he could be angry at. He read the core clause allowing affiliated companies to treat one person as 2 labor pools, and his eyes slowed halfway through. The wording was familiar. Not familiar like a policy he had once skimmed, familiar like his own handwriting. He scrolled to the signature block, and there it was. Deacon T. Holloway, dated 9 years ago. Nobody had forged it. Nobody had buried it. He remembered the year now, the whole shape of it. He had been the young one in the room then, hungry, praised, chasing margin like it was oxygen. The lawyers had drafted the framework, and he had sharpened it himself. He had personally added the clause about affiliated entities because it closed a loophole that was costing him money. The loophole was overtime. The loophole was people getting paid for the hours they worked. He had presented the savings to investors for 6 straight years. He had stood on stages and called it operational discipline. The trap that split Savannah Huerta in half every night at hour 39.5 was not something that had happened inside his company. It was something he had built, sentence by sentence, and signed and sold. He sat with the document open and made himself read every word of it twice. Then he saw the second thing, and the second thing turned his shame into a clock. The same portal showed live operational assignments, and one had posted minutes ago. Crane 7, Pier F, assigned to the Coral Meridian unload. He knew Crane 7 from Savannah's notebook. 3 failure warnings, all 3 downgraded to procedural deviations, all 3 downgrades approved under his framework. The assigned crew was the split badge night shift, whose 50-hour exhaustion existed only in a spiral notebook. His signature and the danger were the same document. He said it out loud, alone in his office, because some sentences have to be said with the mouth before the mind will accept them. He said, "I didn't let this happen. I engineered the exact conditions for it, and it's about to happen again in 50 minutes. He grabbed his jacket and phone, but in the parking garage, the machine he built took its first shot, or rather, at her. His phone buzzed with an automated compliance alert, the kind his own audit protocols generated. Because he had searched her badge the night he found her asleep, the system had cross-checked her clock-out time against gate camera logs. It found what he had found, a worker present after clock-out, but the machine did not read it the way he had. The machine read it as misconduct. The alert said Savannah Huerta had been flagged for unauthorized presence in a secure cargo area. Her terminal access was suspended pending review, effective immediately. No shifts, no badge, no pay on either of her paper selves. The system had noticed that she worked for free, and its answer was to make sure she could not work at all. He read the alert 3 times in the garage with his key in his hand. His attempt to understand what he had built had just destroyed the one person who had documented it. He had not reported her. He had only looked at her file, and looking had been enough. The machine defended itself the way it did everything else, automatically, politely, in clean language. It had eaten the witness. He drove to the terminal himself, fast, through empty streets. She was already at the gate under the yellow light, her hard hat beneath her arm after the reader rejected her twice while the guard avoided her eyes. She was not crying. She was doing math. He could see it on her face, the same math from the notebook, rent and Marie English and Lucy's school shoes, running against a number that had just gone to 0. He walked up and started to explain, and she turned, and something in her face changed. Not surprise, recognition. Years earlier, the break room television had shown him praising operational discipline, and her memory held faces as firmly as container numbers. She looked at him the way you look at a piece of a puzzle when it finally turns the right way up. She said, "You came down here to audit the thing you built?" He did not deny it. There was no version of denying it that survived the next 10 minutes, and he knew it. He told her his name, his real one, and he told her what he had found in the archive, and he told her whose signature was on it. She listened beneath the buzzing gate light, hard hat under her arm, then nodded once as if filing the facts. Then he made the offer, because he was still, in that moment, a man who thought problems came with buttons. He said he could restore her access tonight. One call. Her badge, her shifts, her back pay for the suspended hours, all of it fixed before sunrise. She said no. Not slowly, not with drama. She said it the way she flagged a bad twist lock, fast and final. Because some failures you catch on sight, or not at all. Then she gave him the sentence the whole night would turn on, and she gave it standing at a locked gate with 0 income and a 6-year-old asleep across town. She said, "Fixing my badge just teaches the machine to hide one woman better. Fix your name or fix nothing." He stood there and took it. She watched him take it, and she kept going because he needed to hear the rest, and she would only say it once. She told him she would not be his proof of conscience. She would not be the one worker he saved, the good story he told himself, the exception that let the rule keep running. There were 4,100 people on his docks. If his fix only fit one of them, it was not a fix, it was a receipt. He drove back downtown before dawn and called his general counsel and his operations chief out of bed. By 7 in the morning, there were 9 people around his conference table, and by 7:15, he understood that his signature had built something with better defenses than he had. He said he wanted the split badge framework killed. He wanted every dual payroll identity merged. He wanted the Coral Meridian unload pushed back to the safety schedule. The room did not say no. The room did something worse. It explained. The general counsel, a careful woman named Philippa Wong, laid it out without raising her voice. Merging the payroll identities would create a legal record proving the company had known the 2 identities were one person. That record could trigger overtime claims going back years across 4 states in the tens of millions. She was not defending the scheme. She was describing the wall around it. The scheme had been built so that dismantling it was more expensive than continuing it. He knew that. He had built it that way. Operations was blunter. Delaying the Coral Meridian meant missed berth windows down the whole coast, penalty clauses, a shipping line partner already unhappy. The projected cost started at $7 million and climbed with every hour. A board member on the speakerphone, an older voice named Gail McConnell, said the sentence boardrooms always find, She said one tired worker did not justify blowing up a network that 4,000 jobs depended on. She said it kindly. That was the worst part. The trap did not need cruel people. It ran fine on kind ones. The debate went in circles for 40 minutes, and it might have circled all day, except Savannah Huerta was in the building. He had asked her to come, and she had come, not for him, but because her notebook had nowhere else left to go. That morning at Marie English's table, she photographed every notebook page, having learned that evidence copied twice was harder to erase. Then she had taken the bus downtown with the original in the freezer bag inside her jacket. She walked into the conference room in her work boots and did not sit down. She put the notebook on the table, opened to a page marked with a rubber band, and she flattened the whole debate with 4 facts. Crane 7, the crane assigned to the Coral Meridian, had been throwing false load position readings for 5 months. She had the dates. 3 operators had reported it, and all 3 reports had been downgraded, and she had the report numbers, and the downgrades had been timed to dodge a scheduled state inspection. She had that date, too. The room went quiet in a new way. Philippa Wong reached for the notebook and read the page twice, because this changed the shape of the problem. Until that moment, the executives had been weighing a moral question against a financial one, and financial questions always win that fight. But a crane that lies about where its load is, run by a crew that has been awake 50 hours over a working pier, was not a moral question. It was a bomb with a schedule. The overtime scandal and the physical danger were now the same problem, and there was no version of handling it quietly left on the table. Deacon pulled the camera archive himself, right there on the wall screen. The footage from the February incident had been deleted from the main system, but deleted at a port meant moved, and he knew where his own company hid things because he had approved the retention policy too. The clip came up grainy and silent. A container on Crane 7 swung widely outside its reported path, crossing a lane where 2 ground workers had been standing 9 seconds earlier, narrowly missing them. The crane was never repaired after that. A recorded repair meant a recorded failure, and a recorded failure meant shutdown. So the failure had simply been renamed until it disappeared. The Coral Meridian's first lift was scheduled inside the hour. Deacon looked at Savannah across the table and asked her to help him stop it, and she answered the only way she had left. She said, "Risk something that's actually yours first." So he did. He drafted the emergency order at the head of his own conference table while legal watched. Ground Crane 7 immediately. Freeze the scheduling system across all 14 terminals. Preserve every payroll record, both identities, no deletions, no renames. Notify the state safety regulator and the federal wage authorities voluntarily today with his name on the cover letter. Philippa Wong told him plainly what the order could cost. The shipping contract, his chairmanship, his personal legal shield because a voluntary disclosure with his signature on both the crime and the confession left him nowhere to hide. He read the order once more and sent it. For 30 years, his signature had only ever added to him money, terminals, power, floors of glass. This was the first time it subtracted. His hands were not steady when he hit send. She noticed that, and she wrote nothing down. And she noticed that she wrote nothing down. Now, the people above the man who built the trap were about to fight to keep it closed. The fight took 11 minutes to arrive. His phone lit up before the order finished propagating. The board had convened an emergency call without him, led by Gail McConnell's steady, kind voice, and they had found a clause, because there is always a clause, and they used it. A counter order went out to all 14 terminals under the board's operational authority. Continue the Coral Meridian unload as scheduled. Disregard conflicting instructions, pending governance review. 2 orders now sat in every supervisor's inbox on Pier F. One said stop, one said go, and the ship was already sliding toward the berth. The floor split the way floors always split, along the lines of fear. Some supervisors read the two orders and halted their crews because stop is the safer word when a lawyer might read your name later. Others read the same two orders and moved to prep Crane 7 because the board signed their bonuses and the chairman was, according to the rumor already running the pier, finished. Jim Hull stood between two crews with a radio in each hand and did not know which one to raise. Savannah and Deacon reached Pier F as the Coral Meridian's lines went over the bollards. The ship was enormous up close, a wall of steel and stacked color, and under the work lights, the night crew was drifting toward the loading zone in ones and twos, men and women with 50 hours behind their eyes, because the board's order said go, and their rent said go, and nobody had ever once rewarded them for stopping. Deacon started toward the Crane office to fight it with authority, and Savannah caught his sleeve and told him authority was the wrong tool. The crews had watched authority lie to them for 9 years. One more executive shouting orders, even the right orders, was just weather. She left him standing there and walked to the operations shack, and she picked up the shared channel radio, the one every crew on the pier monitored, and she keyed it. She did not defend Deacon Holloway. She would not have crossed the street to defend Deacon Holloway. She read facts instead, in the flat, clear voice she used for container numbers. The voice every checker and lasher and operator on that pier had heard 1,000 nights and trusted without thinking about it. She read the crane number, Crane 7. She read the 3 warning report numbers and the dates they were filed and the dates they were downgraded. She read the real hours. She named no names, but she read the numbers, 51 hours, 54 hours, 49 hours, and every worker listening knew which number was theirs because a person always knows their own exhaustion when they hear it said out loud. Then she said the only sentence of persuasion she would allow herself. She said, "Don't trust him. Don't trust me. Trust the thing you've all watched almost kill someone." The radio hissed and went quiet. On the pier, nothing happened for a moment, and then something happened that Deacon Holloway had never seen in 30 years of ports. A lasher named Tia Long stepped backward out of the loading zone, just stepped back over the painted line and stood there. A supervisor barked at her, and she did not answer, and she did not move. Then Rudy Norris stepped out beside her, then 2 more. Then a whole gang drifting back over the line like a tide going out, while the supervisors shouted about discipline and abandonment, and every one of those threats landed on people who had already done the math and decided a written warning weighed less than a container. Not everyone stepped out, that has to be said because it was true. A skeleton crew stayed with the crane, 3 men who could not afford 1 lost shift, and an operator named Sapphire Gray climbed into the cab of Crane 7 because the board's order had her supervisor's name on it, and her supervisor was standing right there. The unload would run short-handed. It would still run. The board's order was still winning, slowly, the way money usually wins. Then Sapphire Gray ran a controlled test lift using an empty container, a final movement to verify the controls before the unload began, and Crane 7 told its last lie in front of everyone. The cab display froze. The load position readout locked on a number and held it, steady, green, confident, while above the pier the spreader and its test container kept rotating past the point the screen swore it had stopped. The machine said one thing, the steel said another. It was the badge reader all over again, the payroll all over again, the whole 9 years all over again, a system reporting a comfortable number while the truth swung wide of it in the dark. The container came around in a long, flat arc and crossed the exact patch of concrete where the full crew would have been standing, the staging square where 14 people worked the first lift every single night. The arc swept across the common working height. Then the container met the steel impact barrier at the zone's edge, and the sound reached them a half second after the sight, a boom that people felt in their teeth 3 piers away. The barrier folded, a light tower collapsed, and a nearby yard truck was severely damaged along its entire side, from cab to tailgate, and nobody was under it. The staging square was empty. Tia Long was standing 40 feet back of the line with her arms folded. Rudy Norris was beside her. The gangs that had stepped out were all standing behind paint and distance, and the skeleton crew had been positioned at the far hookup point, and Sapphire Gray sat locked in her reinforced cab with her hands off the controls, shaking, alive. The exclusion zone had held because the workers had built it themselves, body by body, in the 11 minutes before the swing. Silence after steel is a special kind of silence. Deacon Holloway stood in it and understood, finally and completely, the sentence the whole night had been trying to teach him. The port had not been saved by his emergency order, which the board had smothered, or by his money, which was useless here, or by his guilt, which was worth even less. It had been saved because the people who ran it had stopped. They had never once been allowed to stop. Savannah had fallen asleep, standing up because stopping was the one thing his system had made impossible. And the first time the workers took that power back, it saved 14 lives in a single swing. Savannah walked to the edge of the wreckage and looked at the crushed yard truck for a long moment. Then she took out the notebook and wrote the date, the crane number, and the time. 11 months of pages, and this was the last entry the notebook would ever need because everything in it had just been proven in steel in front of 200 witnesses on camera in a way no one could downgrade or rename. Somewhere behind them, Jim Hull was already on the phone, and his voice was shaking, and he was not calling the board. The sun came up on Pier F and found it full of people who did not usually stand in the same frame. The night crew, still in their vests, too wired to go home. Day shift workers arriving into a story already half told. 2 local news vans, then a third because a container through a barrier at the port of Long Beach travels fast on a scanner feed. And a state safety regulator with a badge and a folder who had not been summoned by the wreck. She had been summoned hours earlier by the voluntary disclosure Deacon Holloway had signed at his own conference table before the swing, when stopping it still might have cost him everything for nothing. The board's lawyers reached him by phone twice that morning and told him to say nothing. He walked out onto the pier instead, in front of the workers and the cameras and the regulator, with a printed copy of the Workforce Flexibility Framework in his hand. No podium. No prepared remarks. He stood on the concrete between the crushed yard truck and the crowd, and he read the clause out loud. The whole clause, the sentence that let one human being be split into 2 labor pools so neither half ever earned what the whole person was owed. Then he read the name beneath it, his own. He said the dual payroll design was his, personally, written 9 years ago to protect margin. He said the fatigue reports had been renamed and buried under approval chains that his framework created. He said the bonuses paid to terminal managers had rewarded unload speed with no safety weight in the formula, which meant his company had spent 9 years literally paying people to ignore what Crane 7 had just done. He did not use the word mistake. A mistake is something you do once. He had signed this thing and then praised it to investors for 6 years, and he said that too. Then he made it operational because he knew confessions without instructions are just theater. Effective immediately, all speed-based bonuses frozen across 14 terminals. All payroll records, both identities, open to independent investigation, not company auditors, outside ones, chosen with the regulator. Back pay calculations guaranteed for every split badge worker, going back the full 9 years, with the company waiving the statute defenses Philippa Wong had spent the morning explaining to him. And he was stepping aside from operational control while all of it was examined, starting today, with the regulator's office holding oversight until further notice. The cameras turned to Savannah Huerta because cameras always look for the woman in the story, and a producer was already moving to pose her at his shoulder for the shot. She stepped away from him instead. She would not stand beside him, not for one frame, And when the microphone reached her anyway, she used it, but not the way anyone expected. She stood among the workers next to Tia Long, and she said her piece from there. She said, "He didn't save this port. We stopped it. He finally stopped ordering us to move." Then she turned the refusal into a list, and the list was the real speech. She had written it on the last page of the notebook sometime before dawn, and she read it the way she read container numbers. One combined hour count per worker across every subsidiary, no exceptions. Retroactive overtime on the merged hours. Protected rest periods that no supervisor could shorten or erase. Schedules issued 14 days in advance, so a mother could promise her kid a Tuesday and keep it. Independent sign-off on equipment repairs outside the company, so a failure could never again be renamed into a deviation. And safety representatives on every pier, elected by the workers themselves, not appointed by management, with the power to stop a lift. The regulator wrote all 6 down. So did the reporters. Deacon Holloway agreed to every one of them on camera, out loud, by name, which mattered because things said on camera by name are hard to rename later. Savannah watched him agree and did not thank him, because you do not thank a man for returning what he took, and both of them knew it. Change was not clean after that. It never is, and the story owes you the truth about it. The shipping line pulled its contract within a month, $700 million of annual volume moving to a competitor in Oakland, and the workers felt that loss before the executives did because volume is shifts and shifts are rent. Investors sued, 2 funds, and then a third, arguing the disclosure had torched shareholder value, which it had. 4 executives were removed, including 2 who had approved the downgrades on Crane 7. Gail McConnell resigned from the board with a statement about spending time with her family. The payroll audit would take years, 4,100 workers, 9 years of split records, every merged hour a small excavation. Deacon lost the chairmanship at the next board vote and lost his annual bonus and lost the legal shield that had wrapped his signature for 3 decades. And the narration will be blunt here because Savannah would want it blunt. A rich man losing status is not the same as workers losing years of their lives. He went home each night to the same glass tower. Jermaine Stone was still in Bakersfield. 9 years of stolen overtime does not unsteal because the thief feels the loss of a title. What Deacon Holloway lost was real, and it was still the cheapest bill on the table. And he knew it, and to his credit, he never once said otherwise in public. Savannah did not go back to work right away, and this part matters too. The company invited her back within a week, publicly, warmly, with her suspension expunged and an apology drafted by 3 lawyers. She said no. She had said no to him at a locked gate with nothing, and she was not going to say yes now for less than everything. She waited until the retaliation protections were signed into the settlement with the regulator, enforceable, with penalties. She waited until the wage correction formula was locked in writing, not promised, locked, with her merged hours calculated and the first back payment cleared into her account. Then, and only then, she badged in. 1 badge, 1 name, 1 record of 1 whole woman. The reader on the gate blinked green, and the number it showed was, for the first time in 11 months, true. She stood there a second longer than she needed to, looking at it. Rudy Norris, behind her in line, asked if the gate was broken. She said no, she said it was fixed. Then she put on her hard hat and went to work on the clock. Every minute of it counted, every minute of it hers. 6 months later, the terminal looked the same from the outside. Same cranes against the same sky. Same wall of stacked containers, red and blue and rust. Same gulls working the water line. Same trucks idling at the gate at 4 in the morning with their parking lights on. A port does not change its face. It changes its clock, and you can only see a clock from the inside. Inside, the clock was different everywhere you looked. 1 payroll identity per worker, system-wide. audited by outsiders who did not answer to the company. Overtime counted across every subsidiary, so an hour worked was an hour owed, no matter which letterhead it fell under. Schedules posted 14 days out, printed and taped inside the break trailer, and workers stood in front of that paper the first week like it was a strange animal, because none of them had ever been able to see 2 Tuesdays ahead of their own lives. Rest periods sat in the system as hard blocks now, protected, and no supervisor could shorten one, erase one, or ask nicely about one, because asking nicely was in the settlement too. Crane 7 was gone, scrapped, its replacement signed off by an independent inspector whose paycheck the company could not touch. The hot meal station stayed. It had a real budget line now, with a name on it instead of a hiding place, and nobody called it a mistake anymore. Tia Long ate there most nights. So did Sapphire Gray, who had gone back up into a cab after 2 months and a lot of quiet, because operating was what she was good at, and being good at something is its own kind of healing. In the spring, the peers held their first safety representative elections, real ones, paper ballots in a coffee can, counted in front of everybody. Savannah Huerta did not campaign. She did not have to. The crews knew whose notebook had done the work of 9 years of inspectors, and when the count finished, she had carried Pier F with almost every vote cast. Elected by the people she worked beside, not promoted by the people above her. She understood the difference better than anyone alive, and so did the crews, which is exactly why they chose her. The job fit her the way the checker job always had, because it was the same skill wearing a new badge. She noticed things. She wrote things down. The difference was that now, when she wrote a crane number next to the word failed, the crane stopped that hour and a repair order went out with an outside signature on it, and nobody anywhere in the building could rename what she had seen. Her first month, she red-tagged a chassis line and stopped a lift in the rain, and a new supervisor pushed back, and she did not argue with him. She just showed him the settlement clause on her phone and waited. The lift stayed stopped. Word traveled. Nobody pushed back the second month. Her paychecks were one paycheck now, and the back pay installments landed on schedule, and the math of her life had margin in it for the first time since Lucy was born. Not wealth. Margin. She paid Marie English properly, real money, on the first of the month, and Marie cried about it exactly once and then never mentioned it again, because that was Marie. Savannah bought a high-mileage used Corolla that started every morning, and sometimes she sat in it before work, simply because the minute belonged to her. She worked nights still, by choice now, because the differential was still 90 cents, and because she had built her body around that clock for years, and it was hers to keep. But the schedule came 14 days ahead, so twice a week she was home for dinner, at the table, awake, while her daughter was awake. The first few times, Lucy kept looking up from her plate like she was checking that her mother was still there. Then she stopped checking. Kids adjust to good things faster than adults do. It is one of the mercies. It was at that table, on an ordinary Thursday over macaroni, that the riddle from a year ago finally came home. Savannah had never asked about it. She had carried the strange little sentence in her chest for months, the way you carry a thing you do not understand from someone you love. Lucy was drawing on a napkin with a pencil, feet swinging under her chair, and she looked at her mother sitting there, elbows on the table, nowhere else to be, and she said it without looking up. She said, "You catch the table now. It's not lonely." That was all. She went back to her napkin. And Savannah sat very still and understood at last what a 6-year-old had seen a year before anyone else had. Her daughter had seen her come home before dawn and fall asleep standing against the kitchen counter more than once, and had built a story to survive it. The way children build stories to survive the things nobody explains. In the story, the table got lonely at night because nobody sat at it. In the story, Mom stayed on her feet so she could catch it, so she could be ready, So the standing had a reason that was about love instead of about money. A 6-year-old had renamed her mother's exhaustion into devotion because the truth was too heavy to lift, and she had done it with the same tool the company used, a rename. Except the child's rename had been mercy and the company's had been theft, and the difference between those two things was the whole story. Savannah did not cry at the table. She reached over and finished the corner of Lucy's drawing with her, and the thing that had been too tired to sit was finally sitting. Across the harbor, Deacon Holloway still had an office, smaller, lower, with the word chairman gone from the door. He came to the terminals less now, and when he came through the gate like everyone else, and the crews nodded at him the way you nod at weather that has passed. On his office wall, there was no photo of Savannah Huerta, because she would never have allowed it, and no crayon drawing from a child she had never introduced him to, because some doors stay closed and should. There was only one thing on that wall: the original workforce flexibility framework, all 9 pages, framed behind glass, with his signature visible at the bottom, beneath the clause that had harmed thousands. He had hung it himself at eye level, directly across from his desk, in the one spot in the room he could not avoid looking at. It was not decoration. It was the bill. The last image belongs to her because the first one did. A night shift in early summer, deep in the protected break, the one no supervisor can touch. The break trailer was warm and the coffee was real, and Savannah Huerta sat down in a chair all the way down and closed her eyes while still on the clock. Nobody reported her. Nobody photographed her badge. Nobody woke her 1 minute early. The reader on her chest counted every second of that rest as work, because rest was part of the work now and had always been. And the only thing that had changed was that the paper finally admitted it. Around her, the port ran on. Cranes lifted. Trucks rolled. And a woman who had once slept standing up against cold steel slept sitting down in a chair. And the world did not end. The ships still got unloaded. They just got unloaded by people who were allowed to be people. This story is fiction, but it highlights the severe impact of systemic wage theft and unsafe working conditions. The narrative critically examines how a system labeled workforce flexibility was exploited to deny fair compensation and benefits, exposing rather than enabling dishonest practices. Unpaid overtime, off-the-clock work, employee misclassification, and workplace fatigue are documented labor concerns. For verified information, consult the public resources of the U.S. Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division and the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. Those records exist so workers, employers, and viewers can understand the risks and recognize the protections available. The final question is not whether Deacon acted, but how responsibility should be measured after years of harm. He built the system, exposed it, accepted consequences, and helped dismantle it. Does meaningful accountability leave room for redemption, or are some losses impossible to repay? Share your view respectfully in the comments, including what genuine repair should require. The first thing the system took from her was the right to sit down. The last thing it lost was the power to keep her standing. The badge finally counted one whole woman. Comment your thoughts and subscribe to Mallory Coleman for more hard-earned justice.